And so I was like, that's what success is. This is what I'm building. You know, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to create that. And it's going to be like this business. And I looked at my business that I'd built and I'd worked my ass off and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars investing in. And I was like, I don't think this is what I want.
Oh my goodness. All that time and energy. Right,
Yeah.
because it was built upon an assumption of this is what success is. And at that point, you questioned it. You said, is that what I want?
Never one for 1 minute thought, do I want this life?
Welcome to the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. I am your host, Jamal Javanji. I'm a best-selling author, podcaster, full-time life coach, and a communications and cultural analyst. After spending over 20 years of working with people in various stages of struggle and challenge, and after traveling to many places all around the world, visiting many different cultures, I have discovered the common roots of human suffering, along with the sustainable solutions required to help people heal and become whole and liberated. This podcast is my gift to you to serve you on your journey into healing, wholeness, and liberation. I invite you to buckle in and to settle in to each episode here on this podcast. There's something for you in each conversation. Guys, welcome back to another edition of the show. I am super excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Really excited to introduce to you a very special guest. Her name is Marni Battista, and she is the CEO and founder of the Institute for Living Courageously, which I love that title. She's an entrepreneur. She is an author, has a fantastic book coming out with a fantastic publishing company called Hay House Publishing. Hay House has been a pioneer in, spiritual, personal development. You know, I don't even know how you classify it, but it's a great publishing house, and her book's coming out in February of next year of 2025. It'll go on pre-sale in December, which we'll talk more about that. She is a coach, a transcendent coach, which I actually love that word, transcendent. She's a transcendent life coach. She is a podcaster, and she has been on numerous shows, and including Dr. Phil. The Dr. Phil show. She's been on, I believe it is on Air with Ryan Seacrest, which is fun. She has been featured in the LA Times, amongst many other publications. So we're just honored to have Marni Battista on the show. Marni, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I love that introduction. That was so nice.
Of course. I love to, obviously there's so much more to a person than, the CV or the bio. I do really feel honored to have you here on the show.
Thanks.
I know that you're going to share some nuggets. I just want to kind of quote unquote warn the listeners as they're listening to this podcast to be prepared. I say this often, but I'm saying it now for a reason. Please be prepared to receive something specifically for you in this podcast episode. So
I'm feeling it.
Yes. And if you have a pen, I know I'm kind of old school. I like to write things down with a pen on paper, but if you have one, I would encourage you to grab one. If not, your phone, something to jot down a note will be just fine. But there is something for you in this if you're listening to this. So let me encourage you just to be prepared for that. Also, and I don't say this enough, but I will say this. There are people, the reason we create these shows, the reason that Marni is here, and the reason I do this show is because we really are passionate about people and about helping people and serving people and helping people really break through their limits. Because when we do that, the whole world changes and we're all connected. So if you're listening to this and for whatever reason, a person, a friend of yours, a loved one, a relative, somebody comes to mind, there's a reason for that. And I would encourage you to pass this episode on. Obviously I'm biased. It is a plug, but please do. This is great content that we're putting on here. So please feel free to share this episode with a friend, a loved one that you think could benefit from this conversation. So all of that said, Marni, thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit. I like to just jump right in before we get into your message here. Give us a snapshot of who you are.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's funny. I was rewriting my bio for my book, and I have like a consultant, marketing book person. She was like, "Okay, so for Instagram, you need to like do it in like 5 words or less." And so I was like, Marni Battista, transformational coach, podcast host, nomad, and radicchio lover.
Ooh, say that last one again. What is it?
Radicchio. It's like a kind of lettuce. It's red.
Oh, yeah.
Radicchio. I love
Radicchio.
radicchio.
Okay.
And so I was like, I want to put that in my bio because it's so unusual and most people haven't heard of radicchio, but I love to cook and it's got a great flavor and it adds a splash of red to your salad and it makes it look gourmet. Even if you're not a gourmet. And that's kind of like the metaphor for what I do to people's life is like really create that one special thing that's you, that is an expression of your soul that just makes your whole life light up. And it really tells a lot about who you are. So I'm also living in Colorado and I used to live in LA, and my husband and I chucked it all to screw the should life. We lived in an RV for a year until we decided to settle here in Colorado.
Well, I did read that you spent a year in an RV with your husband and 2 cats. Is that right?
Yes.
And you guys traveled around the country. I can't wait to get into that with you because I think that did inform you in a lot of ways as to, and even how you're serving people now. Like a lot came out of that year, I would imagine.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you, because, and again, when people are children, rarely do people say, "Oh yeah, I want to be doing this." Even though the idea of, kind of what we're passionate about is there. It's hard to imagine what we're doing when you're a child. But what was it like for you as a kid growing up? You grew up in Iowa, is that correct?
I grew up in Iowa, and I'm Jewish, and there was like, not a lot of Jewish people in the town I grew up in. There was like 8 kids between like, let's say like 10 and 15. And we were all like siblings, growing up together. My parents were very, I'm going to say like cultured in that my dad grew up in New York City and my mom grew up in Denver, actually. And so when they were raising me in Iowa, they were sort of like, we got to show you the world, And so when I was like 10, I wanted to go on this like French American like ski snow exchange thing.
Oh, wow.
And I took French lessons and I went and I made this bet with my dad that I was going to come back and speak French fluently, which I did. The reason why I'm sharing that is that I think like for some of us, when we're younger, like I went to a bunch of different universities. I just like switched colleges because I was like, I want to study this. Now I want to live here. And I was like, let me figure out a way to still graduate in the same time. And, there's just this like creation mode that we're in when we're younger. Yep. And I was totally raised that way. And when I lived in LA like 25 years and I had my kids there and I had this community, and my husband was like, I want to get the hell out of here. And I was like, no. And I couldn't imagine like change or moving or letting go of anything. And I think that is what can happen, right? Is we believe that like there's a certain time in our life where we're creating things. We're creating a career, maybe creating a family, moving. We're flexible, we're free. And then we get into a certain time in our life and we're like, nah, I'm done. We're just going to cruise from here on out. And it was part of that realization that sort of was like, oh God, like who have I become? What's going on here? Because I think I've lost some part of myself along the way.
Amazing. So what I'm hearing you say is, so grew up in Iowa, which is very traditional Midwest. We were talking before we jumped on here. I'm from Ohio. Yeah. So I get it. I did feel that way. I felt like, there was, even though I didn't know always how to articulate it, I think growing up, I felt like there was a low ceiling and I kept bumping my head. Yes. And I'm like, which is funny for me to say that because I'm very short, but I did feel like there is something expansive that I really am longing for this expansiveness. I love travel as well. I love French. French was my second language as well. I've spent time there. Love it that you did that. How old were you? Just curious. When you went,
I was 10. I was in 5th grade.
Oh, wow. You spent time in France?
Yeah. And I went with a friend, Michelle Fletcher, and I had a French au pair girl when I was like 5 or 6 or 7, and she had a family with like 7 siblings. And so not only did I go do the month like program, but I went like 2 weeks early, and I went and stayed with this family for 2 weeks with so many siblings. I had one sibling. I was like, whoa, there's so many people in this house. So I just made it this whole expansive experience, and I believe that it planted that thirst for like learning and growing and wanting to see what else is out there and finding the common connection. And so, yeah, I was 10.
Absolutely amazing. And what a pivotal age to have your, because you don't know what you don't know until you see, and then your world gets expanded like that. And that probably informed you. I don't know about you. That's one of the reasons I wanted to live in California, is because there's something about coming out west. And then of course, there's such creative people out here, and the energy's very different than my experience of back in Ohio, even though I love Ohio. Yeah. Just different feel. Right. So you move out to LA, raise your children there. How many children do you have?
I have 3 daughters. So now they're 28, 26, and 22.
No way. I would never guess that. Right. Yeah. You don't look like you could have children that
Bless
age.
your soul, Jamal.
Well, so you raise your children in Southern California, but what I'm hearing you say also is that there came a point your husband gets a little restless, and he's wanting to move, but it really challenged you. You really realize that maybe I've gotten some comfortable here.
Yeah, I was super stagnant. So what's interesting is my kids at the time, one was in college. She was very clear, like, I'm going to do these internships. I have this industry I want to be in. I'm definitely not coming back. My other, at the time, my other 2 daughters lived in Manhattan. And I had an understanding of 2 really profound things. One is that my mom died when she was 64. Okay. I was 55. It was like 2021, 2020 when all this was going on. Of course, not only the pandemic, but I had a traumatic, near crippling ski injury, actually in February 2020, where I had to sort of like come to terms with this idea of feeling like if I wasn't doing and producing and achieving, like, who am I? Because I wasn't able to do any of those things for a few months, and I was concerned about all of that. And my future. And so I sort of had this idea of like, okay, wait, well, if I had just 9 years to live, like if my mom would have known, okay, you have 9 years to live, like, how are you going to spend that time? And I looked around my house, my beautiful house that I just remodeled and made it perfect, because I thought that would make me happy. And I had all the pictures on the walls of my kids and, all this stuff, right? And I thought, this is a museum of a part of my life.
A museum. That's interesting.
My daughter actually said, our house is an emotional museum, and you don't have to keep it open for us anymore.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, damn, girl, you said it better than I could have. And that's what it was. And I was like, I can't just sit here waiting for my kids to come back and visit, Mm-hmm. I mean, I could, but I didn't want to. That just didn't feel like me.
Mm-hmm. No, there's a whole new chapter moving, and you sense that. Very uncomfortable, right? In what way was it uncomfortable for you to recognize that, okay, I'm thinking about moving out of California. What did that elicit within you?
Well, first of all, like it was overwhelming. I was sad that a part of my life was over. I'd worked really hard to build my business up to a certain level. I had, a certain amount of success in the industry that I'm in. I had all the nice clothes. I had the nice house. I had the cute husband. I had all this stuff, right? And I also realized that I was chasing this definition of success.
Interesting.
That I wasn't sure if that was going to be when I had my last thought, my last breath, my last feeling, if that was really going to be the life that I wanted to have. My dad died in 2019 and he was in the hospital and I always joke, he wasn't planning to die that weekend. He was sick, but he had like a random thing that landed him in the hospital and then he ended up dying from something bigger, like a few days later. But there he was, like unconscious, kind of. He didn't know it was going to be his last day of speaking. And he was like mumbling about like his credit card bills and like, his money and just all this kind of stuff. And I remember having this fleeting thought of like, God, like, really? Is that what are you worried about that at the end? And but I was so confused, Jamal, because I was like, that was the way I was raised. And I was like the breadwinner and I wanted all the stuff. And I thought that all those things were what gave me peace. But what I realized was they just gave me this sense of control because I was in charge of everything. And I just was afraid to let go and not know and not be in charge. And then I've been with my husband now for 15 years, but at the time it was like 12 years. And I just fell into this habit of blaming him for everything, right? Like, this isn't right. It's your fault. You're the one who's not happy. You know, this is a you problem, not a me problem. I thought I built the castle around me and I was like, this is the thing that keeps me safe. It's like Jenga. I don't want to pull out one piece.
Totally. No, that's so good. And, you said something that I think is really powerful. And obviously I lost my mother in 2021 as well. You were 55 at the time and she was 67, 68, something like that. Is that correct?
My mom was 64.
64.
When she
okay.
died.
When she passed. Okay. So you're thinking like, if I had just a few years left, like if 64 is my last year of life, do I want to spend the next almost decade or so like this? That's such a powerful, people don't like it. I know obviously we have millions of years of survival mechanism built in to prevent us from thinking about death, but death is such a powerful thing. It gives meaning and substance to our life, without, I mean, just thinking about even what you said about your father, like not being, when he passed in 2019, he wasn't planning to die. It sounded like most people aren't.
Right, exactly.
Most people are not actually planning to die when they die. And yet it's one of the most important events that we're all, 100% of us, are going to face. So it's something we want to think about because it gives context to life. Because obviously if he was planning to die, credit card bills, they're not going to matter, right? It's not going to hold that kind of weight, So really, really powerful what you're saying here. So did this lead directly to the idea with your husband to say, let's get in an RV and let's just travel around the country?
No, it led to a lot of arguments. But I'm very, so my husband's British. So they would say, you're very clever, aren't you? Meaning like you're smart, right? And so I was very clever. So I was like, I have a way I'm going to procrastinate and avoid. And so I was like, I have an idea. Well, first of all, let me say this, Jamal. The first idea I had was to get information. And so I was like, I'm going to go online. I'm going to find a book about like, how do you go through this transition? How do you create the next part of your life when you're in your 50s? Or late 40s? what's empty? Like, how do you redo your life when you're an empty nester? I like had all the buckets, right? So I went online and I literally couldn't find anything other than like, you need to let your kids go. And I was like, I'm good at that. Like, I love my kids. I'm obsessed with them, but like, I'm good. Then it was like, get hobbies. I was like, this girl, I don't need to learn how to play pickleball. I'm like, got a lot of hobbies. I'm cooking, I'm reading, I'm knitting, I'm crafty. I love my work, right? Like, I was like, no, nobody gets it, right? And so I continued doing this research, and I came across someone who did life design. The framework of it was for financial independence. So it was like really geared around the whole FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. Well, I'm like too old for that. But I found this person. And so I said to my husband, do you want to take a class with me on this life design thing? Let's plan it. Let's think about it. Let's work on it together. And he was like, okay. So we did, and it was with a bunch of 30-year-olds, which was really fun. But that was like the first step really of me actually looking at my life. And my husband and I had done annual planning, and we're very like goal oriented in our own ways. But this was something of like, oh, here's a process by which you could actually create your life, not just in a way of like, oh, well, this happens, then that happens, and you're responding, but in a way of actually creation. And so that process is the process that led me to the RV.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're literally, you and your husband are sitting there going, let's design our life. Let's just do it.
Let's do it. Let's design our life for the next chapter.
And something you're passionate about is living life on your terms. I think that's how you put it. You're very passionate. You want to help people to live life on their terms. What keeps people? Because I love even the idea of like, oh yeah, we're going to design our life. Most people actually, I know I didn't grow up in a family. I mean, it was all survival. I mean, this is what you got to do. Go to school, get the good, education, get a good job, pay the bills, make sure you get good benefits. And, just that was it. That was the highest idea. It wasn't said this way, but it was like the best you can hope for is to pay your bills.
Yeah, pretty much.
Never sat well with me. There was no idea or concept of like, you can actually design your life the way you want it. And there are no limitations. And again, that challenges so many mindsets, poverty mindset, so many things. But for you sat down with your husband, which I love. It's like, well, let's design our life. And then did that lead to the RV expense?
So,
Okay.
So first of all, one of the things so I was doing this process, but I also in that process realized really quickly an interesting thing. And I think that I want to make it really, really clear because I think we don't realize we're doing it. So even when you say to people like, oh, you can design your life, people are like, okay. And they think of like, well, what trips do I want to go on? Whatever. And so most people, when they're designing their life or thinking about their life or their bucket list, it's a 10% variation of their current life.
Okay. Let me just say that again. Okay. I want to repeat that because I think there's a lot in what you just said. When most people think about designing their life, they're really just regurgitating their 10% of what they're currently doing. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. You're like, oh, one day I'd like to live by the beach. One day I'd like to go to Japan. When I retire, I'd love to blah, blah, blah. Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's just a variation of enhancing maybe some experiences that they want to have, but it's really not a different life.
No. And so, so when I really started to explore what does it look like to live life on my terms, wow. I had to let go. I had to, first of all, define what are my terms.
And that's not a simple question. People think like you really have to know yourself, right? You have to really tune in to kind of, I mean, most people assume they know what they want, but literally when you sit down with somebody, you go, but what do you really want? And if you challenge them, they'll say, well, I want this. And you go, but why do you want that? That's where you start to get the blanks. I don't really know why I want that.
Because of the shoulds, which is what you were talking about, right? That you were programmed in. You're like, well, this is what you should want. I mean, doesn't everyone? It's quote unquote the American dream or whatever it is. Or even if you're Chuck the American dream and you're like, what I really want is, everyone's a nomad. That's what I should want, or I should want to whatever. And so the thing that I had to really start doing is question every assumption that I had about what I wanted, what made me happy, what I really needed versus what I wanted or I thought I wanted. In the design process, so this design process is modeled after a lot of things, but one piece of it is the design thinking model at Stanford University, which most consultants use to design products. So before they design a product, they do this, what we call the empathy phase. And that's where they have to understand the user of the product. So in that life design model that I teach my clients, and I did a version of this that I made my own, was I have to get to know who I am today, because I don't want people to not only design a life that's only a 10% variation, but I don't want you to design a life based on who you think you are, from your past experiences, from what you were told, from what was programmed in, from what you wanted when you were 25. And so then we have to clear the decks again. And you're like, wow, it's a lot of work to have a blank slate.
It's a lot of work to have a blank slate. Amazing. So you're talking about questioning assumptions, everything you think you know about yourself or about your life. Can I ask you, what were some of those assumptions just for you personally that you started to question?
Oh my gosh. When you said that, my heart just started racing because I almost want to cry, because the one that was the most life-changing was my business, because I was a coach. So I was a teacher first. I was a nursery school teacher, making a whopping $21,000 a year. I was divorced. I had 2 other jobs. When I decided that I wanted to be a coach, I had inherited a little money from my mom. I built a website. I built this business, and I had a mentor his mom happened to be one of the biggest transformational coaches on the planet. She's famous. And so he was like, I'm going to help you build this business that looked like this. Cause that's, everyone wants to be Tony Robbins, don't they? And so I was like, that's what success is. This is what I'm building. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to create that. And it's going to be like this business. And I looked at my business that I'd built, and I'd worked my ass off and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars investing in. And I was like, I don't think this is what I want.
Oh my goodness. All that time and energy, right? Because it was built upon an assumption of this is what success is. And at that point you questioned it. You said, is that what I want?
Because I never for 1 minute thought, do I want this life? I'm going to build this business. It's going to be 20 million a year. I'm going to be a CEO. I'm going to have all these people working for me. You're going to know my name. I'm going to be Tony Robbins' girl version. Never for once, I was like, that's a great idea. Let's do it. How do I do it? Who do I follow? What do I pay? How do I, what do I do? Let's do it. And I just set my course that way.
But there was a deeper voice in you. There was something deeper in you that said, Marni, I don't want this. There's something else for you. There's something else that I want. And that voice, it took a while to discover that.
Well, it did. So it's really interesting. So I started to do this empathy phase. I started to really to understand who I am, who's the essential version of me, at the soul level. And I had the same spiritual coach for 15 years, and he was also helping me with my business. And he asked me this question. He's like, what's the soul of your business?
What's the soul of your business? Soul of, if you're a business owner, if you have a company, if you have something that you hold dear, what a beautiful question to ask yourself. What is the soul of this company that I'm running, or this business that I own? So how did you answer the question?
Well, I was like, well, at the time when I first started my business, I was a dating coach.
Okay.
Because, if you're in coaching, they tell you pick one thing, like money, love,
What's your niche?
health.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I was like, well, I needed to learn some stuff about love. That's my thing. Like, it was easy. Easiest niche decision ever. But in the end, I was not doing that work at all. I was always helping people figure out who they are and design a life from that place. I just helped them get a boyfriend, which in the end was like, I'm not going to say it was easy, but when I interviewed my clients who were successful, I'd always be like, oh, wait, don't forget, remind them that you also got a partner. Because they'd be like, I love myself. I don't have this horrible job anymore. I live in my dream town. I'd be like, and you have a partner.
Yeah. The original goal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what was the soul of my business? So I was like, I help people live life on their terms. I help figure out who they are. I help people love themselves. I help people set boundaries and ask for what they need. And that's the soul of my business. And then I realized, Jamal, I'm barely doing that, because all I'm doing is having meetings about coaching staff and marketing and hiring and running a company. And I was like, I was a dating coach. So I was like, I need to break up with my business. Wow. That was really hard.
Today's episode is sponsored by Free to Love Corporate Solutions. Did you know that any company or organization is only as competent, capable, and responsive as its workforce? And did you also know that, nationally speaking, it's been estimated that stress costs companies up to $150 billion, B with a billion, $150 billion in lost productivity every single year. What if your company and your place of work could actually be a source of healing and transformation for its workforce? Well, believe it or not, there is a growing community of conscious companies and businesses that see it as their mission to be a place of healing and transformation, not just for the products that they're offering to the wider world, but also they really desire that their place of employment would be a culture of healing and transformation for the workforce itself. And I've had the opportunity to work with a number of small businesses that are just doing fantastic work in the world. And I would like you to hear from the founder and CEO of a company that is striving to make a difference, not only in the world, but also in the people that work for the company.
I own a real estate brokerage, BRA Realty, here in Pennsylvania, and we have about 110 realtors. Jamal came out a few weeks back and did a training in replace of one of our regular trainings, and the feedback was phenomenal. Really stuck with me was he created a space of safety for a conversation of transformation to take place, where not just did agents walk away with great tips and insight about what's driving them, but also the ability for them to actually take the time and work on themselves in that session, specifically around getting clear on what matters most to them, and to the point where we had multiple agents that were actually crying. I had multiple agents come up to me afterwards just saying it was one of the best trainings we've ever done, and that we should have Jamal back once a month. So just to give you a quick shout out, Jamal, you did an amazing job. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your ongoing coaching with myself. I've been working with you now for over 3 months and have had really, really great results. I intend to stick with it, as there's always room for growth, and having someone like you in my corner has been really helpful. So I appreciate everything you do, and thanks for being you.
So if you're a small business owner, maybe you're on the executive team, you're a founder, a CEO, or even if you're just in management of some level, at a company or in a corporate culture where you oversee people at any capacity. And if you're interested in having a conversation where we may be able to explore how our program can assist you, can assist your company, and assist your workforce, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that possibility. All you have to do is go to my website, jamaljavanji.com/corporate solutions. Again, that's jamaljavanji.com/corporate solutions. You'll be able to fill out a form there, and we will get back with you and set up a time to have a conversation with you about how we can assist you in transforming your company. I can imagine that's tremendously challenging. And, and I totally resonate with you. As a coach, people come to you for all kinds of things, and you end up going back to, that's my experience has been, we come back to the same root, which is, who are you? What's going on inside of you, and what are you, and who are you, and what makes you you? And those are, nobody can tell you, but it's what I've discovered is that the answer to those questions are not in your assumptions. They're beyond them. They transcend them. And that's a process. But I love that you were doing that for yourself. Obviously, this is like, okay, I have to break up with my business. Did that happen in the RV? Did that happen?
No. So I figured out how to do my business in my RV, and that was the very beginning of like, if I have to do this business, that's what I thought. No exaggeration. I was like, if I have to do this, if I have to keep doing this, then I'm going to do it, and I'm still going to start having fun. I'm not waiting until I retire. I'm going to work, and I'm going to live in this RV, and I just set about, bless my husband's soul, like figuring out all the tech and the internet and, all this stuff so that I could work wherever. And I just made it happen. I just made it happen. And so I was doing that, and it wasn't until I was unhappy. I felt like nothing was working in my business. I kept talking to colleagues and friends, and they're like, it sounds like you don't want to do it anymore. And I was like, it was like, la, 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 la. Don't say that. I was like, what else am I going to, what else am I going to do? I finally realized like, I have to let things die so something else can be born.
Well, that's a challenge, right? Letting things go, letting things die that need to be let go of. Because that can really, if you have wounding around the area of loss or any kind of trauma around loss, or if I let go of this, who will I be? I'm going to lose my significance, my sense of being, my sense of security could be different for different people. But you can't, it's almost like if you wanted to refurnish your home with new furniture, how would you put new furniture in there if there's old furniture there, right? You have to get rid of the old furniture. You have to let that go before you can bring new furniture in. And it's the same thing, energetically speaking, with our lives.
Such a good analogy. So the thing that I learned in the RV during that year of like pushing through and letting go of my house and selling everything and was that I let go of my home, and I found my home inside of myself. I found my soul, and I started having those soul level conversations. And I learned that I could let go of something and something else could come from it. I'd had a positive experience. It was really messy and hard the first like 6 months. But I was like, okay, wait, home is inside of me. I now know that. So can I keep pushing the envelope? Can I keep doing this? And that gave me the courage to shed another part of my identity of, like success looks, like this. And by now I had sold my book idea. I had come across these 7 spiritual questions, which define a life of meaning. And so I had started to like pivot and live toward that. I'd had the experience in the RV. I knew I wanted a simpler life. I just wanted to coach people. And so I fired everyone pretty much.
Oh my goodness. So you had to let your company go, let the team go. Oh, wow. That is
It was hard.
courageous.
I was terrified. I was like, I don't even know how to do half this stuff myself.
Yeah.
Who will I get? What will I do? And it was sad because I also loved these people.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean,
So-
all blood, sweat, and tears that went into your company, your team, and to let that go. I can feel the courage and that took to do that. I guess, so I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned like this sounds like post, you could, hindsight, we can talk about this. It sounds kind of neat, but in the process, right? In the process of this, it's a little bit messy. So going through a process where you feel like, okay, I've done this work. I loved it. I mean, I chose it in some way. It has, but that season's over and I need to let this go. And then there's usually a gap, right? There's a gap between letting go and then the new and whatever this new chapter coming in. It requires us to really lean into this other space of just like a vision that goes beyond the physical. Can you give a specific example of like what specifically you let go of? Maybe it is your team, maybe it's whatever. And then how that was confirmed. Like once you let go of that, the gap, and then what opened up for you? Like that really gave you the impetus to say, yes, okay, this is how it looks. This is what,
Okay,
this is
well,
what-
so first of all, I love this question so much because it implies that when you do something really scary and hard, that you get rewarded by the universe with the confirmation you have done the right thing. And that did not happen for me right away. So the first thing, I have to just tell you what failed, and then I'll tell you what went well. Okay, so selling the house, everything is going to flow. I do like a vision of like exactly who I want to buy my house because I'm the only person who's ever lived in my house. It was brand new when I moved in, and I feel like my house had a soul. And I was like, honey, like this is a special space. And so I got these amazing people to move into my house, this young woman and her boyfriend. They were going to have kids. I was like, yes, it's going to be amazing. And I was like, it's all going my way. Thank you, universe. And so before the RV was ready, because it was COVID, so you had to have it like built because there was a shortage, I had decided to splurge and get this really lovely place in the desert. You're from California. I'm going to Palm Springs. It's winter. I'm going to go sit by a pool and do my business and like hike in the mountains, and my it's Thanksgiving 2021, and everyone can finally come, and it's going to be perfect. And so I get in with my 2 cats and the carriers, my husband, and there's a moving truck behind me with our little stuff for storage. And I get to this house in Palm Springs, and I have been catfished.
Oh no.
I have been catfished. This house on Airbnb, like they only showed like the views from the windows like this, and outside of the little photo frame was mayhem. It was nasty. There was like a bedroom and a bathroom, but then the guest bedroom, you had to go outside to use the toilet. It was, and I'm telling you, Jamal, I fell on my knees. I was being dramatic, but I felt like my soul, I got the wind knocked out of me, and I moved my pellet. I was like, I just need my Peloton. I moved my Peloton in that living room. There's boxes. The people in the moving truck are like, are you guys staying? Like, should we unload this stuff? And I just cried, and I was like, I called my financial planner, and I was like, can you get your house back after you sell it? Can I undo this?
Wow.
So I'm sharing that story because that's real life. And I think that sometimes you think like, oh, and then she was so happy and she lived in Steamboat Springs and she was so happy forever and she does this great coaching business and now she wrote a book and she's on Jamal's show, the end. No, it did not go like that. And so that was the moment where I was like, I called this adventure the Radical Living Challenge. And I thought to myself, you silly girl. You thought the challenge would be a little challenge. You didn't get what challenge means. You are going to be challenged. This is the beginning. If you want to grow, lean the hell into this and let's go. And I had to do that. And I had to pick myself up off the floor because no, you cannot get your house back after you sell it.
So you're living in this place then that you obviously wasn't what you were told.
I couldn't live in it. No, I had to get my money back. I had to like do a whole thing. I had to.
Oh, so you could not live in this place. So
no, I could not live. It was literally no. I could not live in this place. I had to pick myself up instantly because again, that's sometimes what happens, right?
Yep.
And so I was like, my husband's like, I'm actually worried about you. I'm like, I'm worried about me too. But here we go. So no, my husband immediately found like a little storage facility. We got the people to drive to the thing. He unloaded the thing. I found a hotel. I snuck my 2 cats into the hotel.
So you're homeless.
Yes,
All
with
this-
five tins of cat food.
With two cats, your husband gets everything orchestrated so they can all be put in storage, and now you're primed for let's not fight this or resist this. Let's navigate this. Let's accept it. I always tell people, all suffering, and this is easier said than it obviously needs to become a practice. But all suffering comes from not what's happening, but really the resistance to what's happening. Because peace is immediately available or accessible once you realize like, okay, this is happening. I don't even like it, but it's happening. So we can work with it. So you start to work with it. Is that when the RV comes about?
Yeah. Well, so we ended up, if not, so write this one down. If not this, something better.
If not this, something better. Ooh, I love that. If not this, something better.
And Jamal, I was just like, if not this, something better. If not this, something better. And we did find something better. And then so then we got into the RV and it rained a lot at the beginning and it was interesting, but there was a moment, and you said the gap. And so this was like when it was my confirmation that I was on the right path. And so we were in, I want to say, Tennessee. And there's a part of the Appalachian Trail that you can hike. And I want to be Cheryl Strayed, but I'm not that adventurous. But I wanted to walk a moment on the Appalachian Trail. I wanted to go on a famous trail. Mm-hmm. And so we did this hike, and it was raining, and I had my raincoat on, and my husband was miles ahead of me as he usually was. And it was like March, and I saw these beautiful little flowers on the ground cover, and everything else looked pretty like end of winter time. No spring had sprung. And I saw those flowers, and I thought, wow, there's such beauty. Like if I look for this beauty, like it's raining, but I'm on this trail and these flowers are here. And so I register that, and I get up to this one little part of the hike. And it's this part where if you look on one side, you see, I think it's North Carolina. And on the other side, you see Tennessee. And I realize, and that spot is called the Newfound Gap. That is the name of that spot on this trail.
Newfound Gap.
Yep. Oh, and I realize this is my problem. I have 1 foot in Tennessee. I have 1 foot in my old life. I have 1 foot in this RV life. And until I commit and put 2 feet in my present, I will constantly be unhappy because I was holding on still to the past, right? And second guessing myself, right? So I was like, this gap is like, this is what happens when you make a change, right? There's the old life and there's the new life. And our tendency is to want to make meaning to try and find a place of like, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Right? I mean, you just asked me that question. What was the sign? Right? And the sign was that that's what we want to not do. We cannot compare. We have to dive into what you said before. This is the new reality. So I got home and I was like, what were those flowers? And I looked it up, and they're called ephemerals. I didn't know that because I'm not a gardening person, but they're these ephemeral flowers. They only can bloom when there are no leaves on the trees because they can get the sunlight.
Oh, interesting.
And they are only here for a moment in time because the minute those trees start to leaf, those ephemerals are going to die. And I thought that, like, every moment is your ephemeral moment. Every moment is a moment where, like, the sun is shining on you and you can blossom and grow. And you have to take that moment because in a minute, the leaves are going to come and it's going to be gone. So that was it. I was like, oh my God, this is just a big sign. It's like, let that go. This is your moment. Blossom now.
Yep.
And go with it. And I was like, okay, universe, you're just going to keep giving me signs along the way. And that really is what ended up being my book, was like every stop, there was some nature thing that happened that kept guiding me to grow and to learn a new lesson. And that was my evolution, was like every stop along the way. It was just my soul's tuition curriculum, and the tuition was an RV.
Totally. I love that. What a powerful story. It's beautiful. And this idea, and I've seen people do this all the time, because of our trauma or unprocessed trauma, fear. I always say fear really does require a past reference point. Otherwise it would just be a new experience. It'd be exciting. But the idea that when fear comes up, it's like when you have one foot in, I love that analogy. I got one foot in this new state. I got one foot in this old state, or the state I'm coming out of. And people naturally will come up with plan Bs. Well, I'm gonna give this a shot. But then, they kind of vacillate. They go back to this and they're resenting. And let me try this over here. Then I go back to this. And it's vacillating. And if there's one thing I could tell people all the time is like, just go for broke, be all in, go all in, no plan Bs. Because I was raised with like, well, what are you going to do if this doesn't work? And you got to think about the plan B to prepare. And it's like, if you have a plan B, that actually plan B, I've seen this happen so many times. Plan B becomes your focus unconsciously. And again, where focus goes, as we all say in the coaching world, where focus goes, energy flows. And if you have a plan B becomes your focus unconsciously. So there's no plan B. It's just like, I'm all in. I'm in this new state and I have no idea what that means, but we're going to figure this out. But it's not what it was. I've just left all of that. And that is the key to quote unquote success in that sense, is because now you're like, okay, something better can now come, because what's my other option? I've burnt the ships. Like I burnt the boats. Like there's no going back in that sense, which is so powerful. So you discovered in this new journey. So now you're on this RV and you're discovering, and life is unfolding for you. It's these ephemeral, life is ephemeral, which is a great picture for life, right? It's only alive now. Once the old season has passed, which is the leaves falling, like that's the old season. Now that all the leaves have fallen, season's complete, the old season's over. Now we can live, but it only happens for a brief moment. What a picture for life. Because you don't live in the past. Past is over. So in order to get to this moment, you have to be done with the past.
Yeah,
because the past is actually done.
It was done. And you know what? It was great, because if I wouldn't have done any of these things, I would have stayed stagnant and I wouldn't have evolved, and I wouldn't be having as much fun, and I wouldn't be having as much love, and I wouldn't be having as much experiences that I am. And also I wouldn't be doing what I really love. And so I'm so grateful that I'm back to like having conversations with you, and got to write my book, and I coach amazing people, and I do it on my terms. And that's my next chapter. Till the next one.
So good. And you talk about, and so I wanted to ask you about this. You discovered in this season 7 spiritual questions, right, for a meaningful life. Would it be possible for you to briefly share those 7 reasons with us? What are those questions?
So I've done a lot of podcasts, and I think it'd be really boring if I list them all out. But I will tell you one that I really love, and then I will tell you where people can get all of those.
Nice,
questions.
very nice. Yes.
I did a podcast once trying to go through it, and they were like, and then what? And then what? It's not pretty. But the one that I think is really cool is this one that says, were you honest? And I'll tell you briefly where it came from. So these 7 spiritual questions, other in the Old Testament, I like universalized and modernized them and put them in a different order. But what's interesting about were you honest was the original question 1, and it was asked, were you honest in business? And that is because the old rabbis who wrote this thought like, well, when it comes to money, that's where people are probably not going to be honest, because greed is a pretty big thing. And so they figured if we ask, are you honest in business? Then if you're honest in business, you're probably going to be honest, right? And I took it another level. I was like, most people learned something about, the 10 Commandments and thou shalt not lie. And I think for the majority of the people who are listening to this show, we don't, generally speaking. However, are we honest with ourselves? And I think that is where people do lie.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
100%, right? And so this question says, to live a meaningful life, were you honest with yourself? Radical honesty. Even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's going to make someone else mad. Were you honest with yourself in that you were following true soul rather than ego, right? Like, are you blaming? I mean, that question is like a treasure trove. And when you start orienting yourself to worry about yourself and be honest with yourself, that can set you on a real path to creating a life of meaning.
Amazing. I love that. Are you honest with yourself? And, a lot of times what I've discovered is that there's a part of us that actually knows the answer, right?
100%.
We know the answer. So many times ego is flaring, right? My ego is flaring. And, the ego can be very sophisticated in its self-defense and justification for, and again, I'm not against the ego. I think the ego has a place as long as we're conscious of it. But it's interesting that there's a deeper part of us that says, yeah, this is just all egoic here. And it, and yet we're not honest with that part of us because we want to defend the ego. And this is kind of where we miss the deeper voice that is here to guide us. And I heard somebody recently say that, to live life on your terms, they didn't actually put it quite this way, but it was like this sense of authenticity that if you're going to live an authentic life you really need to, there has to be alignment with your thoughts, with your behavior and your intuition. All 3 of these need to be together. Yeah. But typically what's happened, because we have suppressed this deeper voice, which is our truth, which is our intuition, the thoughts and the behavior are like rooted in fear and programming and assumptions and all these things that we haven't questioned. And they're leading us actually away from this intuitive dimension that is saying, no, I don't want any of this. This is where I want you. And we're not even hearing that really, even though it's there. We kind of know that voice is there. And so this is why people, I think, often live stuck or unfulfilled, because they're not listening to that station, so to speak. They're not tuned into that station, which is the intuitive station. So I wanted to ask you, and we could probably wrap up with this. Yeah. How do you understand intuition? What is intuition?
Well, that's such an awesome question you asked. You got a twofer, because one of the other questions is, did you seek wisdom? And I think that to your point earlier, most people are very busy seeking knowledge and information because they think that knowledge and information will make them feel safe, and that there's like a right thing to do, and that the smartest wins, and the person with the best and most knowledge, wins the day, and that's what makes you successful. And wisdom is often accessed through what I call wisdom-seeking questions, because often we ask questions of ourselves that do not guide us toward intuition, to our wisdom, but towards questions that we think we can answer intellectually, or questions we will never answer, like, why did this happen to me? Or why did she do that? Or which town should I move to? I mean, there's a million answers to that, right? So wisdom seeking questions are questions that point you toward seeking your wisdom, which is really listening to your inner truth. So often I find when you change the quality and tenor of the question, it forces someone to start thinking in a different way. So we like access your smarts by asking a really powerful wisdom seeking question and then giving you tools to access it, whether it's journaling or meditation or just being quiet, right? Or talking with a mentor or a coach, right? Or someone who's listening. And so that is really an important part of living a meaningful life, is accessing your truth based on your experience and your soul and the knowledge that you have, and putting them all together and moving forward based on that.
I love it. I love it. I love questions because I sometimes refer to questions as golden shovels, because they really help you mine and dig to get the gold, if you know the questions to ask. And I love how the distinction that most people are seeking information, thinking that's knowledge. It's a form of knowledge, but most people are not looking for wisdom, which is more that intuitive dimension. And a lot of that just has to do with the quality of our questions, is what I'm hearing you say.
Right.
Just the quality of our questions. Can you give an example? Can you give us an example of a golden shovel question? What is a question?
It's so
that
funny.
all of us can ask?
In my coaching all the time, when I'm coaching someone in a group or whatever, and I'll like throw them out, and people are like, wait, let me write this down. So actually in my book, in the appendix, there's 120 wisdom seeking questions. So
wait, in the appendix of your book, there's 120 of these wisdom seeking questions.
Yes. So I'm going to give you one of my favorite ones.
Please.
I love that you said at the beginning, be prepared, because this one's going to fuck you up. Okay. What's the thing I'm pretending not, no, let me ask it again. What's the problem I'm pretending to have so that I can have the problem I have?
Oh, wait. Okay. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. What's the problem I'm pretending to have so that I can have the problem I have?
Oh, that is fantastic. What is the problem I'm pretending to have so that I can have the problem?
Because, that you have, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding this. People are unconscious to this, but they're pretending, really, they're creating a problem so that they can have the problem, because the problem is often a distraction to something deeper. Is that correct?
Exactly. Ding, ding, ding. Yes. And so in the book, I actually have that question because it's so good. And so people are like, I would, send it in a message to my clients to be like, I don't get it. And I'm like, exactly. So I break it down. So like go on a walk and just be like, what's the problem I'm pretending to have? Just go with that one, and then be like, what's the problem I'm pretending to have so that I can have?
Yeah.
See what comes, and break it down and play with it. And just allow it to be there. There is no right answer. But discovering what I call the essential problem is the key. Like, I thought my problem was, where do I want to live in retirement? The real problem was I'm terrified of change, and I've made my internal home external. That was my real problem I had to solve. So the nugget, the golden shovel, is figuring out your essential problem through this question.
Yes, because typically it's been my experience that there's something I don't want to feel, something I'm avoiding to feel. So I'm going to create this problem so I can focus on this problem, so I don't have to actually face the thing I don't want to feel, which is vulnerable in some way, shape, or form. But if I'm willing to face that and feel it, what's amazing is that it's not that big. It seems big when I'm avoiding it, but as soon as you move into it, you're like, oh, this is it.
Deal with that. And notice how it dovetails with radical honesty. So all the 7 questions kind of work together and support each other.
Well, I love it. So this book, the title of the book is called Your Radical Living Challenge, 7 Questions for a Meaningful Life, coming out by Hay House, February 2025.
Exactly.
I'm excited for this book. Fantastic. And the 100, and she said 125
120
wisdom seeking
120 wisdom seeking questions. And I have a little quiz. So if you want to know if you are actually living a meaningful life, if you have like the personality type to live a meaningful life currently, people can go to decodeyourdestinyquiz.com. And those questions will help you really look at like your identity currently, and are you in that direction or are you not?
Ooh, so good. Decode
Your Destiny Quiz.
CODE, Decode Your Destiny Quiz, all one word.com.
Yep.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. So that'll be there. Where can people get in touch with you?
They can go to marnibattista.com.
marnibattista.com. We'll have that in the show notes as well. Awesome. And then, of course, don't forget about the book, Your Radical Living Challenge, 7 Questions to a Meaningful Life, coming out via Hay House in February 2025. Excited for that book. So
Thank you.
Marni, we could go on and on.
We could. You're such a good interviewer, Jamal.
Oh, well, thank you. You're such a great host, or a great guest. So thank you for being here and doing your work in the world. I am so glad that you got radically honest with yourself so that you could be in your zone of genius, doing what you're here to do in the world. It matters a lot to us all. So thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And
appreciate you.
Of course, and guys, if you're listening to this, feel free to, always love to hear from the listeners. Feel free to share this with folks that you feel like could really benefit from this. But this has been a great conversation. And Marni, thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening all the way through to the end of this podcast episode. When you show up and you receive the gift that was for you in this episode, it not only benefits you, it benefits all those that you love and the wider world around us. This work that you're doing, the hunger that you have, it's so important, and I commend you for tuning in and being open. If this podcast has been a blessing to you, then I would ask that you do something to give back to this episode, to give back to this podcast. One of the things that you can do, and it's cost-free, very easy, and is super helpful, is if you'll just go to iTunes and rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Also, if you'll go to Spotify, if you listen on Spotify, go to Spotify and rate and review this podcast on Spotify. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference in the algorithm, and it helps people find our show. Thank you again for being here. And until next time, take care.